Hi, I'm Renée Walker, a mindset mentor, speaker, and lover of all things spiritual. I believe that at our core, we are all spiritually wired for love, peace, success, and abundance. Here on the podcast, we're diving into mindset, wellness, and business, but always through a spiritual lens. Let's just say we're going deep, but we're keeping it light. So let's elevate your life from the inside out, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Spiritually Wired. Welcome back to the Spiritually Wired podcast. Today's episode is about something that we all experience, but is often misunderstood. And that is resistance. Most of us see resistance as a block or as something to push against, to avoid, or to feel frustrated by. But what if resistance is actually our greatest teacher? What if instead of fighting it, we could learn to work with it, to see it as a way to guide us toward healing, towards growth, expansion? Now, here's the thing. Not all resistance is the same. Some of it comes from within, and some of it comes from just life itself. So today we're going to break down the difference between this inner and outer resistance. We are going to look at how both of them can teach us profound lessons and how to move through them with as much grace as possible. So let's start by defining this internal versus external resistance. When I think of inner resistance, it is something that is showing up inside of me, and it's something that is holding me back at the subconscious level. I don't necessarily understand it. It's happening. It's that procrastination, the avoidance, the fear that shows up, even when maybe logically we know that we need to do something. So we can't always make sense of it, intellectualize it. It's this resistance that exists within you. And then there's also external resistance, and that is when just life happens. Something that is completely outside of our control just throws us off course. So there's a bit of a difference between inner and outer resistance when we go deeper into it. An example, for instance, of inner resistance, I know for me personally, would be around my finances, which logically makes no sense at all. I have an economics degree. I used to work in finance. I'm even married to an investment advisor. But every time I sit down to just work my numbers or organize my finances, there's just this energy that shows up inside of me every time. And I've told myself sort of stories like, I just don't like doing it. I'm going to get to it later. So I tend to procrastinate on this. But really the truth is that resistance is never random. There's always something more underneath it. So in my case, because this is something that I've been exploring, I'm quite aware of it. The resistance is really about this deeper belief around money and spirituality, meaning that I have this old narrative that's running in the background that's saying, a true spiritual teacher, a healer isn't here to make any money. So there's a disconnect there. Even though I consciously know that that's not true, my subconscious carries a charge around money. And it's something that I'm still working on, something that I'm still healing right now, actually. So what this internal resistance does is it is showing me that there is room for healing there, that there's an opportunity to grow. So if every time, once you start to build that self-awareness and you start to realize, okay, I've got a huge resistance around, it's not even money itself, it's more the organizing of money, then that is an opportunity for me to be like, okay, there's something here for me to learn, for me to grow from. In the mindset work that I do with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, we refer to resistance often as a charge, which means like there's this emotional or energetic block that is connected to a past experience, and the charge is a sign that there's this unresolved energy. So you can look at resistance. So you can use the word resistance, but you can also use the word charge. So it's like if I'm thinking about my finances and there is something there at the subconscious level that is not quite healed or that is stuck energy, then I'm going to feel it as if there's a charge around it. In Vedic philosophy, there's something called a samskara, which is similar, right? We all have different ways or different names that we use for similar things. A samskara is an imprint on the subconscious mind that keeps repeating itself until we heal it. So again, an energetic block. So we can look at it as resistance, as a charge, as a samskara. Doesn't really matter the word that we use. What is really important is that when it comes to healing at the energy level, the goal is for the energy to flow. But when we hold on to resistance, whether it's through our limiting beliefs or through unprocessed emotions, we're blocking that natural flow of energy. So it's sort of like there's a kink in if you think of a garden hose with a kink, right? The only way to clear it is to find a way to unkink that hose for the energy to move through it. For me, it means sitting with my discomfort. It means understanding where it comes from. I don't really need to spend that much time going back to poke and see like, okay, where did that actually? However, having a certain understanding around where this resistance is coming from gives me an opportunity to reframe my relationship with money. So the resistance isn't the problem. The resistance is actually showing me that there is room to grow, room to heal here. So that would be when you are feeling inner resistance. And there's obviously so many different examples that we can come up with. The other part of resistance that I wanted to explore in this episode is when there is resistance coming from an external source, when life just throws you a curveball in the form of what you're experiencing now is resistance. So we're going to call it that outer resistance. And that is, again, the kind that we don't choose. It's not something that we've planning on doing, but that we have no choice but to figure out a way to navigate it. The interesting thing, of course, is that I'm right in the midst of dealing with one of these at the moment. I am in the process of healing from a concussion, which I clearly did not plan for, and it was not something that I was expecting. I had everything mapped out for my day, and certainly is not how things planned. So in one moment, I was asked to shift, to completely reorganize my day, my week, and now it's turning into longer than that. So this is the type of resistance that it can feel very frustrating because, of course, it's out of our control and we did not ask for it. And it is very easy to spiral into, why did this happen? And I am sure that you can come up with so many different experiences that you've had in your lifetime where life happened and you thought, what just happened? Why did this happen? And the thing is that what I've learned, I know myself personally, is that we never can figure out the why in the moment. The deeper meaning around it, the insight, almost always comes much later. So it's when we can take a look back and we have now a different perspective, we're able to see it from a different viewpoint. So instead of asking, why did this happen? Because clearly we're going to assume that this is something that can't be changed. Why did this happen? A more powerful question would be, what can I learn from this? Because the truth is that external resistance or outer resistance shapes really who we become. In my case, so right now, this concussion has forced me to slow down. It is teaching me a whole lot of patience, a lot of surrendering. Also, the importance of allowing myself to rest, to receive. I've had to ask for help and to receive help. It is showing me the imbalance that I have in my life around having to use my eyes and the amount of work that I do on screens, which is more than I should be doing. So it has been a big, I want to say eye-opener, but being that I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's given me a different perspective, that's for sure. It's not a lesson that I would have chosen for myself, but I can see how it's opening me up in different ways. And even now, I can already see why it had to happen this way too. So when life throws those blocks, resistance your way, there's usually, there isn't much that we can do about the actual situation. It is more about leaning into it. Just like we can't control the waves in the ocean, what we can do is learn how to ride those waves. So instead of resisting the resistance, resisting reality, it really is about learning to accept it, to flow with it. And this is where the spiritual piece comes in, because the only way to ride the wave is to just surrender, to fully let go of where it's going to take you, and to keep trusting that everything is somehow working for you. Even more so in the moments when it doesn't feel like it, or when you can't see it. Those are the moments that we're actually even being more called to lean in, to surrender, and to trust. And the reality is that you get to choose the perspective that you take in those moments. Is life happening to me, or is life happening for me? And does life happens sometimes and there's no purpose to it? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I know that when I focus on the fact that whatever the challenge is, who I become in the process of moving through the challenge is really ultimately the gift. And there's always something there in some way. Again, sometimes it takes much longer for us to see it. Other times we're able to see it a little bit sooner, but there is always something to learn from it. So whether the resistance is coming from within or it's coming from outside, the way that we heal, the way that we grow is by really accepting it, by allowing it to be, and then by moving through it. And here's where it gets uncomfortable, is that the only way to move through the resistance is by doing the very thing that you are resisting. So if you resist being seen, then you're going to move through it by allowing yourself to be seen. If you resist being vulnerable, there's fear around being vulnerable, then the only way through is to lean into vulnerability. If you resist slowing down, maybe you can get away with it for a bit. Usually at some point life may force you to slow down so that you can learn that lesson, if that is the lesson that you need at that time. So it will always feel uncomfortable. Resistance is meant to feel uncomfortable, yet we are so used to avoiding it, to doing everything that we can in order to not feel it. We avoid it, we procrastinate, we look the other way, we distract ourselves with so many different things in order to not feel the discomfort. So part of it, part of the healing, part of the moving through is accepting that there is discomfort in the process. And you do it anyway. That's how we heal. Not by forcing, so there's not a forceful energy to it. It's not about trying to fix it either. It is simply about softening and allowing yourself to be with the resistance, be with the discomfort. As soon as you allow yourself to be with it, you loosen the grip on it. The more you resist it, the more you give power and energy to the resistance. By allowing yourself to be with it, just that alone softens the grip around it. And you do this also by loving yourself through it. So the key is really to meet yourself with compassion instead of the frustration that you may be experiencing. And you don't want to push yourself to get over it quickly either, because if I've learned anything is that you cannot rush the healing. It happens in time. It happens when you are really ready to surrender. One last thing that I wanted to add when it comes to moving through resistance is the idea of discernment, because this is a question that my clients will often ask me, and it's one that I've asked myself so often. How do you know when resistance is something to push through or when resistance is a sign to change direction? And that is a very good question. This is where what has always resonated with me, what I always come back to, is love versus fear. When resistance is coming from fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of stepping into your power, that is your cue to lean in. That's where your growth is. But when resistance is coming from a place of love, so it comes from a place of your intuition is just nudging you away from something that may not be aligned with your values, when resistance is pushing you away from maybe a relationship, that is when you want to listen, and it may be that opportunity to pivot and to make a different choice. Because there are times when, that resistance is your intuition nudging you in a different direction. Discernment is very subtle, and the way in which we begin to tell the difference between, is this coming from fear, is this coming from love, is the only way is by cultivating a deep relationship with yourself, by being curious, by asking yourself all the time, where is this coming from? When you notice the resistance, where is this coming from? Like, what is this? Is this love? Is this my intuition protecting me? Or is this a certain fear that I'm moving through. So you want to always be asking yourself, always being in conversation, in relationship with yourself. Because when you get really honest with yourself, you usually know the answer. Now, you may not want to know the answer because maybe that answer is not the one that you want to hear, but deep down there is a knowing. And the other thing to remember too is that you can't really get it wrong. All you can do is lean into it, be curious, do what feels right, and then just do it again, right? Let go of the pressure to have it all figured out. So the next time that you feel some resistance, whether it's something that's happening again within you or a life knocks you in the head, pause and just ask yourself, what is this either inner resistance showing me? What is it trying to teach me? What is this life lesson teaching me? How can I surrender in this moment instead of fighting the resistance? What if you welcomed it? Because resistance is a guide, it's a teacher, it is a map that is pointing you towards the healing, the expansion, the growth that is ready for you. I want to thank you for being with me today. As always, a reminder that you are spiritually wired for love, for success, for abundance, for healing, for growth, for expansion, and you are a miracle. If this episode resonated with you in any way, I would love for you to subscribe to our podcast, to share it with a friend. And just remember, if you are right in the thick of it right now, there's a lot of resistance. Do your best to lean in, to listen, to trust the process, and remember that you are not alone. Until next time, I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Spiritually Wired. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review. It really makes a big difference for the podcast. And if you're ready to dive deeper and join a soul-led community, come be a part of the Spiritually Wired membership. With weekly life lessons and a rich library of recorded classes, it's designed to support you every step of the way on your spiritual journey. We currently have a special offer where you can receive your first month for half the price. You can find a link in the show notes or come check it out at reneewalkerwellness.com. Until next time, remember to take some deep breaths. Remember that you are spiritually wired.